Shavua Tov, Boker Tov, good morning everyone. Shalom to all of our friends. Thank you so much for joining us over here in Rechavia Nachlot, in Yerushalayim in general, and around the world. This week we're going to continue the course which we've begun a couple of weeks ago on Tehillim, Psalm number 119. And as we said, there are each letter is like a paragraph, a section for itself. Up until now, we've learned the first three letters, Aleph, Bet, and Gimel. And today we're going to start the letter Dalid. In other words, 8 verses, which each one begins with this letter Dalid. Before we begin, I want to mention that tomorrow evening we're going to have a special lecture in memory of my dear uncle, Yisroel Goldberg. You can probably do a search on him on YouTube. He was a very, very special man. He made an aliyah with his family 1991, and he was unfortunately murdered 17 years ago. Vav Shvat, the 6th day of Shvat, which is tonight, and therefore tomorrow night, Tuesday night, we're going to have a special talk in his memory of Uncle Chezi, my father's youngest brother. Unfortunately, he was murdered right here in Rechavia on bus number 19 on Rechavia. And so I feel that he's very, very much connected to my shlichut, which we began only about 6 years later. And perhaps we'll talk about it tomorrow night, Tuesday night. Also, tonight is the yahrzeit of Shoshi's grandfather, Saba Nachman, and this learning today and also tomorrow's learning will be dedicated in his memory. Nachman Shalom Shachna ben Moshe Shmuel. We are going to start to learn the letter Dalid in Kuf Yutet. And as I bring my Tehillim even closer, we can all learn together. No matter which edition you have of the Tehillim, so I have the Tehillim open in front of me. It's verse number 25, Pasuk Chaf Hey, and the first word is Davka. So let's get right into the Tehillim, the great poetic words of David HaMelech, King David. These verses of the letter Dalid are going to primarily discuss the subject of how David feels low down by himself. He doesn't feel with a high spirit. He feels crushed. He feels broken. As you'll see right here in the first pasuk of the letter Dalid. Davka le'afar nafshi. My body or my soul clings to the dust. So therefore, chayeni kidvarecha. Keep me alive according to your word. In other words, when David HaMelech feels that his body is clinging to the dust, like a person who passed away, so one needs that Hashem chayeni, that Hashem should add life into the person's neshama, into the person's being. And King David continues in Pasuk Chavav, Drachai siparti vata'aneni. I have related my needs, and you have answered me. Therefore, lamdeni chukecha, teach me your statutes. So similar to how David HaMelech said earlier in Pasuk Yud Bet, number 12, he said, Baruch atah Hashem, lamdeni chukecha. The same words, lamdeni chukecha. Those two words are the exact same. So one of the commentators explained that the first time it says, Lamdeni chukecha, teach me your statutes, it was the basic laws, the basic dinim, halachot of the mitzvahs and how to do them. Over here, David HaMelech is adding, Lamdeni chukecha, teach me the deeper mystical interpretation of your chukim. The more I understand, David HaMelech says, the more I understand the ruach, the spirit of your mitzvot, I'll be able to observe them better. Now we're up to Pasuk Chav Zayin. I'm just going to finish all of the 8 verses, and then we'll go back and we'll try to explain a couple of interesting points here or there. Verse 27, Derech pikudecha havineni. Make me understand the way of your precepts. Pikudecha, that's the way of saying mitzvot in this verse. Ve'asicha b'niflotecha, that I may study your wondrous acts. Pasuk Chavchet, 28. Dalfa nafshi mituga. My soul drips from grief. So Hashem, kaimeni kidvarecha. Sustain me according to your word. You promised Natan Hanavi, the prophet Nathan. In other words, Natan Hanavi promised in your name that Malchut Beit David, the kingdom of David, is going to be Mekuyam, is going to have a strong sustenance. So don't allow my soul to drip from grief. Kidvarecha, you Hashem, you promised. Chavtet, Pasuk 29. Derech sheker haser mimeni. The way of lies, take away from me. Remove from me the path of deceit. V'toratcha chaneni, and favor me with your Torah. One of the commentaries says as follows. He says that, you see, David HaMelech is not involved in sheker, God forbid. He's not involved in lies. However, there are some lies that seem to look like good. They're like packaged in a nice positive package. Like it says that the Yetzer Hara doesn't come to a person one day, all of a sudden, someone that's an observant, and say, go do Avodah Zarah, commit idol worship. Because obviously they're never going to listen. So he has all these kinds of nice packages, how he presents it to the person, that the person feels that they're not going straight out against Hashem. Just that they're doing something which is not 100% good, and then that's how the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, tries to get a person to go against Hashem ultimately in a worse way. So David HaMelech says, Derech sheker, a way of sheker, which may be packaged in good, but ultimately it's sheker, haser mimeni. Please take it away from me. V'toratcha chaneni, and your Torah, favor me with your Torah. Because when we cleave onto Torah, as we're going to talk about in a couple of moments, Bezrat Hashem, then I feel that saves me from the sheker. Lamed, verse number 30. Derech emuna v'charti. I have chosen the path of faith. Mishpatecha shiviti. I have set your laws before me. 31. Davakti be'edvotecha. I cling to your testimonies. Hashem al tavisheni. Hashem, do not put me to shame. As we said several verses earlier, also in the letter Bet, we said, I'm just trying to find it. I was just joking. It's in letter Gimel. Verse number 22. Gal me'alai cherpa vavuz. Roll off from me shame. We talked about that last week. That we should not stand in front of Hashem or in front of a tzaddik with shame. We want to have pride, Jewish pride. Now we have the last verse of the letter Daled, which begins with a Daled, Lamed Bet. Derech mitzvotecha arutz. I eagerly pursue the way of your commandment, the way your commandments. That's ki tarchiv libi, for you broaden my understanding. This is a very beautiful verse. What is David HaMelech saying over here? Ki tarchiv libi, There are a couple of interpretations over here. First of all, Hashem, when you broaden my heart and I don't feel so angry, then I'm able to observe your mitzvot properly. When a person is locked in, or as we say today, quarantine, however you want to word it, and a person is not able to express their desire for the service of Hashem and to be able to exercise the mitzvahs properly, then it makes it a great burden on the person. But when you have ki tarchiv libi, my heart feels broad, wow, then a person actually feels that they can observe the mitzvahs properly. Then the second interpretation is that ki tarchiv, when you broaden, what does that mean? David HaMelech is acknowledging that sometimes we cannot observe the mitzvahs properly. So we need to quote unquote broaden the observance or the meaning of the mitzvahs. For example, when we have a Beit HaMikdash, we bring bikurim, a beautiful basket of the ripest fruits to the Beit HaMikdash. But now, when we don't have a Beit HaMikdash yet, very soon, Be'ezrat Hashem, we will. So how do you have the concept of bikurim, even if not the literal mitzvah of bikurim, the first fruit? By bringing gifts to a Talmid Chacham, to a Torah scholar, a saintly man, a tzaddik, that is a way of bringing bikurim in these final moments before Mashiach comes. So let's go back for a moment and to look. Actually, before we go into the couple of details, I want to share with you a thought that since this letter Dalid, there aren't many commentaries on this section of the chapter Kuf Yutet, I want to share with you a thought which is connected to the letter Dalid. If you want to take a pen and paper for a moment and to write down Dalid, you have one letter, Dalid. But each letter is really also a word, Dalid. So you can either say, you can take your pen and write down on the piece of paper 4 letters, Dalid, Lamed, Yud, and a Taf. Dalid, Lamed, Yud, Taf. Dalid. That's how the word Dalid is spelled. In Hebrew, as we've said in one of the earlier classes, it's a very beautiful language. We have a shoresh. We have a root of each word. Every word has a shoresh. What is the shoresh of the word Dalid? Dal. Dal means poor. However, there's another word in Lashon HaKodesh, in the holy language, which means poor. And how do you say that? That's Rush. 2 letters, Resh, Shin, Rush. Rush also indicates that a person is poor. But since Hebrew is so exact, what's the difference between Dalid and Resh, Rush? They're almost the exact same meaning. And soon I'm going to tell you how it's indicated even in the letter itself. Dalid, Dal, means someone who is poor, but doesn't mean they don't have money in their bank account. It means they could be very, very rich, but the person doesn't necessarily take any credit or any benefit from the actual finances, possession that he has. For example, the person does a tremendous amount of hachnasat orchim, bringing in guests. So bringing in guests, the Alter Rebbe says in the Tanya, why is the mitzvah of tzedakah so great, charity? Because that very money that you sweated for, you worked very, very hard, and you can benefit by yourself, and you give it to someone else, That's why tzedakah is so important. And when you say just the word mitzvah, without explaining which mitzvah it is, it refers to tzedakah. Because tzedakah is the general mitzvah that there is. If so, when a person doesn't have any benefit in a positive way from their riches, from their wealth, then they are dal. Doesn't mean they're poor. It means that they are not benefiting, it seems to others as if they're poor. Because if you're really rich, so let's see you buy the fanciest car that there is. But the person can say, 1 second, I have enough money for the fanciest car, but I'm not going to buy it. I'd rather buy a regular car and to use the difference of the money to give others. Rash, Resh Shin is like the letter Resh, the third to last letter. And Rash means literally the person has nothing, unfortunately. Rash, Ula Rash Ein Kol. That the poor person has nothing. What's the difference? If you'd like to draw for a moment on your paper the letter Daled, so you'll see that there's a line across and there's a line coming down, but there's a little line sticking out at the right of letter Daled. By the Resh, it's almost very similar. There's a line on top and it comes down, but there's no little line sticking out at the top right corner. That little line is considered a Yud according to Kabbalah. And like it says in our sages, Chazal teach us that when you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, there is a large Daled. And then I believe it's Parashat Kitisa, which we'll read in about 5 or 6 weeks. It says, Lo tishtachaveh lekel acher, do not bow down to a foreign god. Acher is almost the same word as echad. Aleph, chet, dalid, that's echad. And acher is aleph, chet, resh. And if God forbid a person says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem echad with a resh instead of a dal, I don't even want to say it. I don't even want to verbalize it. But if someone says Hashem echad with a resh instead of the dalid, that's the exact antithesis to the concept of one God. So it's not just a play on letters, a dalid or a resh. That little yud at the top right corner of the dalid says it all, gives it away. What's that little yud? According to Kabbalah, the yud is bitul, is humility, being humble. And in kedusha, in holiness, if we want to be connected to Hashem, we ought to have humility, like the Daled. You might have everything in the world. You might have all riches, all knowledge, beauty, whatever you want. But if a person doesn't feel humble within themselves and doesn't realize that what we have is a gift from Hashem and not self-achieved, but it's every single ounce of it is thanks to Hashem, then we realize, then we're connected to Hashem. But if a person thinks, as an egotist, that I am the one, I'm the big chaverman, I'm the big macher, and I accomplished everything, then Hashem says, in the Gemara in Sota, the Gemara quotes that Hashem says, Hashem says, I can't be with such a person in the same neighborhood, in the same realm. We see that clearly in the word echad, Hashem, one God. That's unity, that's achdut. Everything is one. You might have other stuff around, chairs, cars, trees, buildings, but it's all one. Echad, it's all unified. Every object expresses, calls out Hashem's unity. So you don't necessarily recognize each individual's object. Rather, you're really looking at Hashem, the way He's expressed in many different objects in the world. But it's all one God, and everything is united with Hashem. As opposed to the Resh that's missing that little Yud. It's only a little Yud, it's only a little dot. Doesn't matter. When a person is missing that bittul, that selflessness, that humility, that kedusha, then that's the exact opposite of Hashem Echad. That's called Kel Acher. That's called a foreign God. That's called impurity, Tuma. Sitra Achra, the other side, as it says in Kabbalah. This concept we see also by the Levana. Actually, David HaMelech, the author of the Tehillim, David HaMelech, he, according to Kabbalah, is compared to Malchut, to kingdom, which is really compared to the moon. So, if we have the sun and the moon, the sun is a luminary, and apparently the moon is a reflection of the sun. So right now, the nations of the world are compared to the sun. Am Yisrael, the Jewish nation, is compared to the moon. Sometimes we seem larger, sometimes we seem smaller. But it doesn't mean that the moon itself is not there. It just means that we don't see it. We don't see the reflection of the moon. And so once again, we have the idea that we have everything there, but sometimes we don't see it. So it seems as if it's dal. It seems as if it's poor, but it's not really poor. It's not poor like rush. Dal means that you could be very, very successful, but you don't benefit from it. And in the words of the Kabbalah, leit la migarma klum. It doesn't have from it anything. In other words, it doesn't benefit from it anything. It has a lot. Garma. Garma means it has. But leit la migarma klum. And that's the idea of, when Mashiach comes, of course, then Am Yisrael, being compared to the moon, is going to be complete the entire time. Because then the world will be able to tell how Am Yisrael is on the highest level of Kedusha. And that's the same idea as Malchut. Malchut, if you look at the 10 Sfirot, from the top, Chachma, Bina, Da'at, Chesed, Gevura, Teferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, Malchut. Wisdom, understanding, knowledge, kindness, severity, beauty, eternity, inner beauty, foundation, and Malchut, kingship. So it seems like it's all the way on the bottom. Malchut is at the bottom? Kingship is supposed to be at the top. The answer is, what's the source of Malchut? The source of Malchut is Keter. That's like the crown. The crown is on top of the head. In the sense of the Sfirot, you have the Chachma Bin Adat, the Chabad. That's Kvayachol by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the level of the head. Keter is above the head. So Malchut, true, that's the source is in Keter. So Malchut is rich, but it's called Dal. Dal, being poor, how could you say Malchut is poor? Malchut has so many treasures. A king has so many treasures that even very often you don't even open up. You don't ever open it up because no one wants to. You don't want to show it to anybody. So you have all of the talent, all of the riches. But let la megama klum. Getting back to the words of the Kabbalah, Malchut doesn't benefit anything from it. Because it's so connected to Hashem, it's so connected to godliness. Therefore, when Mashiach comes, Malchut is going to be revealed as being the top. It's going to be the source. The source will be revealed. Okay, so let me just make sure. Okay, so we have, if you just want to peek a couple of verses ago, a couple of interesting points. First of all, in verse number Chavchet, in 28, we have Dolfa nafshi mituga. My soul drips from grief. Rabbi Steinsaltz, Even Yisrael, blessed memory, explained over here that this represents the cry and the grief that the soul experiences. And this is really a spiritual grief, as it says in another commentary, that the word tuga, grief, is the same gematria, numerical value, as kedusha. In other words, What is the grief of the soul? It's not a grief of materialism. It's a grief that one feels that we don't have enough spirituality and we want to have more, which is connected to the idea of the dal that we explained earlier, which really connects to all of these verses, where a person feels pain. It doesn't have to be a physical pain. It's usually a spiritual pain where the neshama, where the soul feels they want to be connected more to Hashem. Okay, and one more point for today's lesson. And with this, we're going to wrap up the letter Dalet. We see over here in Pasuk Lamed Aleph, verse 31, it says, Davakti be'edvotecha. I cling to your testimonies. Then Hashem al tavisheni, do not shame me. This idea of Davakti, I've cleaved, I've connected, I cling onto your testimonies, is something which is a very important foundation in Yiddishkeit, in Judaism. When we have the idea of connecting to Hashem or connecting to a tzaddik, as the Torah says, the same terminology, I believe in Parashat Vayet Chanan, the second parsha of Deuteronomy, of Devarim. It says, Uledav kavo. We have a mitzvah, it's one of the 613 mitzvot, to connect to Hashem. So these are nice words, connect, cleave onto, cling to Hashem. What does it mean to connect to Hashem, to connect to Hashem's mitzvot? What it means is that when we try to be connected, when we try to detach ourselves more from materialism, naturally we connect to Hashem. When Hashem invites us to do the mitzvot and to learn the Torah, the more mitzvahs we do, we connect to Hashem. So when, as the Pirkei Avot says, when you do a mitzvah, that gorer, that drags, that connects, that brings along another mitzvah, because that's the nature of spirituality. Once you start with one mitzvah, then that brings more and more mitzvahs to yourself, and each mitzvah that you do really connects to Hashem. That's the word mitzvah. Mitzvah in Aramaic comes from the word tzavta. Tzavta means connection. And that's our goal. Our goal is to connect to mitzvahs as much as possible, to observe every mitzvah. Once we cleave onto Hashem, we cleave onto the mitzvahs, we cleave onto Hashem's Torah, we connect, then that helps us in the next mitzvah. So if we feel, God forbid, a little bit down in our spirituality, all you have to do is do a mitzvah. You don't have to wait for some big angel to lift you up and to have this huge inspiration. All you have to do is to do a mitzvah, because the more we connect to a tzaddik connects us to Hashem on a greater level, on a more revealed level. The more we do a mitzvah, and the more we learn Torah, that connects us more and more to Hashem, which is the word davka. Also starts with the letter Dalet. Dalet bet kuf. And therefore, David the Melech says, which is also David, starts with the letter Dalet. First and last letter is Dalet. Davakti beidvotecha. I cling to your testimonies. Hashem al tavisheni. God, do not put me to shame. And the final verse, just to finish off, which we said earlier, Derech mitzvotecha arutz ki tarchiv libi. I eagerly pursue the way of your commandments, for you broaden my understanding. The more we feel broadened, the more we feel that we're not so locked in, but we have an opportunity to exercise our Torah and mitzvot, then that is a great recipe to be able to pursue eagerly Hashem's mitzvot. Thank you very much for joining us today. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow morning, and tomorrow evening we're having a special shiur in memory of my late uncle Chezi Goldberg, Yechezkel Isser ben Yaakov Moshe, who was murdered 17 years ago on the 6th of Shvat, early in the morning at a quarter to 9. It was right here in Rechavia on Aza Street, in bus number 19, which you may have heard, unfortunately. And so this will be very, very special to me that you should all participate, and please, to spread the word, it will be a very, very special shiur in Uncle Chezi's memory. All the best. Have a Shavua Tov, and it's great to be learning together with you.